Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. On today's show, Chip Fridrich joins us. We will talk Vanderbilt baseball. This episode presented by the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water. The Well is a coffee house with the mission to bring clean water to the world. To date, over 30 communities around the globe have access to safe water, health, and hope. You too can make an impact by visiting a Well Coffee House location today. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and in the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news today presented by Sutherland and Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who've been injured in accidents. If you or someone you know has been in a wreck or other accident, reach out to Sutherland and Belk, see what your rights are. You can find their contact info online at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt and Michigan play for the national title in college baseball. Game 1 starts Monday night, 6 p.m. Central. That can be seen on ESPN. Drake Fellows expected to pitch for the Commodores. And, of course, Michigan, coached by Eric Bakich, who was a Tim Corbin assistant at Vanderbilt in his early years. The Commodores looking for their second national title in baseball. Today's guest line brought to you by Boll and Branch, which was started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've been away from my bed for a week now, and I'm telling you what, I cannot wait to get home and sleep on their sheets again because you miss them when you don't have them. They are fair trade certified, which means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. And if you have the sheets, get the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy to get $50 off your first set of sheets. Today's question and answer session with Chip Fridrich is presented by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Do you need an insurance agent who wants to know your unique needs and circumstances and will tailor an insurance plan to fit them? Josh is your guy. Call him 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton. He's my agent. Give him a shout, and I think you'll be pleased. Former Commodore pitcher Chip Fridrich joins me now. Chip, appreciate you coming on short notice this morning. We're doing this around noon on Saturday. What a wild one that was on Friday night. What a crazy run it has been for the VandyBoys in Omaha, too.
Yeah, Chris, good morning. It was a crazy game, and when you look back on it, it was a game that really went by pretty quick. It was a fast-paced game. You had a lot of 6 and 7 pitch innings there in the middle frames, and the game was clicking along. But you just felt like if you were a Vanderbilt fan that you needed more than one run, and it kind of diminished the effort that Mason Hickman put out, which was a great performance by him. Another solid outing. And, he didn't have his best stuff. I thought he had his B stuff, not his A+ stuff, but he held the cards intact and long enough until he came out. But yeah, it was just a crazy game, and all the theatrics that happened late kind of made it even more interesting. But it's good to be back in the final. I know that a lot of relief that the rotation can now flip over and go like it's planned on a premium, like the way that Michigan's going to do 1, 2, 3, and makes for a great final. So yeah, wild night in Omaha, and glad we got the victory and we move on to the championship series, and I'm looking forward to going out there.
What were you thinking when you saw Luke Smith say what he said to Julian Infante?
Well, if you remember, you didn't see it. You'll have to tell me because I'm the one who immediately texted you, and I don't know if you and the people in the box saw it, which I wouldn't. I know you have to explain how that works because you guys have access, I know, to monitors, but you weren't aware of it, I guess, until I told you, right?
No, and I'll tell you why. It was, now that I think about it, it's because of Luke Smith himself. The first inning, he gets a strikeout. Let me check my scorecard just to make sure I've got this right. Yeah, the first inning, he strikes out Ethan Paul. and he drops an F-bomb. I don't think it was directed at Paul, but it was exuberant. I thought it might have been the catcher, but I think now it was probably Smith. So they cut the mics at that point. So we're sitting in the press box, and as I said this, I just did a podcast with Mitch Light, and this will air after that one will. And between innings, we are writing. I mean, when you write as a member of the media, you're trying to get your story out as quickly as possible, which means you're writing a running story as you go that you put the final touches on. If it's a blowout or something, sometimes I've literally published stories while a pop-up is in the air to end the game. That kind of thing. This game, it was more elaborate. I was like, I'm going to soak this in and write. But you're writing and doing stuff like that either way. And so none of us were really aware of what happened. My phone starts blowing up through you and some other friends who are watching the game. A friend of mine actually sent me a video from the TV. He recorded it and said, this just happened. And I'm like, holy cow. So none of us in the press box were really aware of it. And then I said something to Adam Sparks about it. And I think probably other people were starting to pick it up on Twitter, because a lot of us will sit up there and scroll through Twitter as the game goes on. So that's kind of what was like. We kind of found out about it after the fact from you guys watching at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And just, I have never, I played and participated in probably 500-600 baseball games in my life. College, high school, summer leagues, all that. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that. You occasionally, if you did it once and the camera caught it, I think probably, not that he gets a pass, but it doesn't get amplified. But this was your wheels in your head were spinning, because you're like, did Julian say something? And then you think immediately that this is a guy, Julian Fonte, who Tim Corbin mentioned in a press conference several weeks ago that, if Tim ever makes an off-color remark in the classroom or in the dugout, Julian kind of puts his head down and just kind of shakes his head. And, he's almost acts like his father. So, Julian respond directly to the question, but I think Julian might have just looked at him. And that just provoked, in the heat of the moment, when you had Smith just go off. And I've never seen, and at my point, I don't think I've ever seen anyone do it 3 times verbally like that and directed. It was almost a craze came over that kid. And just the way he'd been pitching, it's going to overshadow, unfortunately, in this day and age of social media and video, where people we're tweeting, people are tweeting, and people are catching it on Facebook, and it becomes a national story on ESPN. It overshadowed a performance when he struck out 10 batters against one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country. So I've never seen an outburst like that. The guy's human. He's a competitor. He's obviously very confident. But the game just got ahead of him. And as Tim Corbin said, you can't play this game angry. You can't do that. If, he does it on the final out, it's one thing. He still gets trashed by the media and by the fans. But karma has a weird way of working in baseball. And I turned to my boys who are 6 and 9, and they play baseball, and it was a teachable moment for me. Willie Donick tweeted something this morning, and I replied, and I said, I had an example that I could sit there and replay it to my boys and say, this is how you don't act, and look what happens when you act this way. And it was unfortunate for the kid. I don't know anything about him. He had a solid year for Louisville. He was a midweek guy. He certainly had the Commodores in check. And to have this outburst like that on the national stage, when he knows cameras are on, when he knows mics are wide open and hot, it was just, it's a shame for him, but I think he poked the bear. I think that's the old saying, you don't poke the bear, and that's what happened.
As the famous wordsmith Frank Barone once said, you mess with the bull, you get the horns. Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think it just kind of, I don't think Vanderbilt was flat. I want you to think that. Any of your listeners think that. I don't think they were flat. I think they were just getting, a kid was pitching really well and was using his changeup and had a little, swinging there, and he was confident and he was rolling. But that little, you had a guy at the top of the order coming up, and Austin Martin gets the first at. out, and then Blade comes up and gets a key walk. And then a guy who was 0 for 3 on the night, who had pretty much looked like the Duke hitters against Kumar Rocker last week at the plate, and Ethan Paul, and he just laces the ball in his fourth at bat and gets a solid hit in the corner, and it bounces around and hits a little indention, which gave Blade enough time to reach home plate, because I think throw right at the plate gets him, and it would have been a bang play. But just amazing how little things in baseball can happen and come back to bite you, and that's what happened.
Well, let's be clear, that dugout at Vanderbilt is not full of entirely choir boys. They have done their share of chirping and gamesmanship, and they stomp home plate. That's a team that gets on a lot of people's nerves, but I think that's one thing about Tim is they kind of know where their line is and they know their discipline, and you can even hear it in interviews. It's like they are so well regimented about what to say and what not to say and when not to take the bait on questions. I'm a little surprised. I mean, Dan McDonnell is really well liked, and I have a lot of respect for him as a coach and as a person. I hear great things about him, but he now had Mike McAveen ejected. Now, I think that was a silly ejection for calling out, for saying to the umpire, that was a terrible call or whatever he said. That was terrible, but it just is kind of stark, the difference between the discipline in the two dugouts. And I'm a little surprised that Dan didn't take a little more responsibility and maybe take ownership for his team not showing more class in that spot. Again, I like Dan a lot. I mean, I hear great things about him, and this is not meant as an attack on his character, but I was a little shocked that he doesn't address those things more himself.
Oh, I guarantee you, Chris, that situations like that, when you talk about Tim Corbin's classroom that he spends a great amount of time in the classroom that they have at Vanderbilt, and the jokes about how to brush your teeth and how to shave and just the life lessons that some of the former players have talked about that he does in that classroom. I guarantee you there's moments in his educational process that he talks about dealing with the media, talking back to other players, what happens if you're asked a certain question by the media. And of course, Ethan Paul's comment was such a testament to that. I mean, you're looking at, you could tell it was obviously he's a good kid. I mean, you can tell that just by his disposition in Ethan Paul. But just the way he handled the question, 30 seconds or 45 seconds after the game, he said everything right. He was polished. He didn't go overboard, where in a situation you could have gone overboard and that emotionally and talked back and gotten some shots in on Smith after the game, and he didn't. And I think it's a direct testament to what the kind of program Tim Corbin runs. McDonnell, he's a different cat, Chris. He's very emotional. He's the only coach I've ever seen. He's done this twice now. He's cried in a press conference after his team won because he got emotional about the other coach on the other side losing. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not making fun of it at all. I think he really wears his emotions on his sleeve. He got upset in the press conference and cried a bit when they beat Vanderbilt in 2013, the year that resembled this team that won the 27 games in the SEC that year. And he was in Nashville, and he got emotional because he said he knows how hard it is to get to Omaha, and he felt bad for Vanderbilt. And then he got emotional the other night when they defeated Mississippi State because he's very, best friends with their coach, and he got upset on the field in post-game interviews. So, yeah, he's a different cat. I think he's very respected in the coaching world. He's going to coach the U.S. national team this year, and Corbin said after the game it's going to be several Vanderbilt players he's going to be coaching. It just sometimes I think it's a learning process. He said one guy get tossed and another could have very well, if the umpire had caught it in a high stakes game, that may be something that's a learning moment for him that he can take that into next year. But, there's no doubt the guy knows what he's doing, but I think just the game got a little ahead of him, and there's no love lost between those two schools. I mean, they compete a lot for the same kids, and they're kind of 2 hours away, and it's a very competitive atmosphere, and it just got away from Louisville last night.
I feel like things are coming full circle. This has just occurred to me as I'm listening to you. Obviously, we were on the eve of the rematch with Michigan. Of course, the Wolverines knocked Vanderbilt out of the National Regional back in 2007. It's one of the greatest upsets in college baseball history. It's still one that people around that program and around college baseball talk about. It's one that probably no one will forget as long as they live. But Tim will tell you, and I've spoken about this on the podcast and written about it before, he was a different guy then. He was a guy that had not learned to control his emotions and things like that. And he will tell you in so many words, that was really the difference between what happened where they left off in 2007 and where they picked up in 11 and especially 14 when they won that first national title. I feel like they've almost taken more steps since then. I mean, I watch the way these kids answer questions, and I'm thinking, I'm over twice their age, and I wouldn't answer the questions nearly as well as they do, A. And I look at the poise they showed last night, the throw that Ethan Paul makes to home to get the out, the way they didn't gag anything up last night, the way they had a lead get away from them but kept their cool. I think it really is what makes this team special, among other things, is the discipline and the experience and the leadership. And I just think that really came home on Friday's game. I think that might have, if you look at it in the way the two teams reacted to different situations, that really may have been the difference between Vanderbilt and Louisville on Friday.
Oh, yeah, and you hear the Vanderbilt players continually say, well, Corbin calls it training. He doesn't call it practice, but immediately after the game, one of the quotes, Ethan Paul, was about the hot shot to him when the infield was drawn in, cut the runner off the plate. You know, he said, we practiced that hundreds of times. And that's the difference when you train like that. And, you know, if you've ever watched a Vanderbilt practice, it's a treat. And if it's ever opened the opportunity to do so in the fall, you got to take it in. Not talking about you, the listeners. I'm not sure if they ever open those things up. Occasionally, maybe. But it is a work of art to watch that. They've got, you know, your normal pitching machine hitting ground balls to fielders in a rapid fire mode. And I'm sure that throw by Ethan Paul came natural because he's probably done it 500 or 1,000 times in rapid fire succession, going over every single scenario that happens in a game, infield drawn in, infield back, working on double plays and pop foul ball. So yeah, it's just that situation. They were trained for that, Chris, and they don't flinch. And when you've done something and you've trained it over and over again, it becomes a habit. And I think we saw that they don't get ahead of themselves. You didn't see any dropped heads when the lead was lost in the later innings, and it's a testament to how they train.
Let's talk about Michigan for a second. I know that its bread is buttered two places. Its starting rotation is, I think, one of the best five in college baseball, probably. Its outfield is really good, 3 pro prospects there. And by the way, 2 of its starting pitchers, I think, were taken in the competitive balance round B, which is within the top 100 picks of the draft that just happened, and they've got a third talented arm in there, but I don't know how much you've been able to watch them. I've not seen them as much as I wanted to out in Omaha because I've been busy with other stuff. But what have you seen, and what has stood out about them when you have seen them, Chip?
Well, they haven't had to do much. That's what stands out. I mean, they're winning their elimination game, 15-3. I mean, to say they've coasted, it would be selling them short, but they've had the easiest road. And their pitching staff's intact for next week, just like Vanderbilt is. So it's going to be a good matchup there. You're going to see best on best. But I think and the guys in the booth and ESPN have mentioned this, Cal Peterson especially, said, Michigan's not going to be able to beat Vanderbilt with 3 pitchers. And they had a complete game in game 2, and then which was a 100-pitch complete game, and then they coast yesterday in their waltz that they win over Texas Tech. And I agree with that. They're going to have to go deeper than 3, and that's where they do have a very talented 1, 2, 3, probably the best in the tournament. But that's not, Vanderbilt can, I think, exploit that and get deep into some counts and get the pitch counts up and go in their bullpen. There'll be no secrets here. I mean, with Bakich being in Tim Corbin's staff, they know each other. Jiffy, his wife, Eric Bakish's wife, they're very close with Maggie, and they. I think I read somewhere they've hung out and gone to dinner there. So of course, that's going to be a story, and the similarities are going to be a story of how their programs are run, how they recruit. I think Michigan does the calisthenics in the outfield in between innings. That's a Corbin thing. There's going to be a lot. Of course, ESPN's going to do their job, and they're going to show that, and they're going to show the similarities and the different things. Michigan does the little different with the signals and the belt that they wear, which I can't stand really. But instead of doing straight signs, but there's going to be tons of similarities. I think Vanderbilt's got to get into their pen early and make sure that they don't get ahead of themselves there, because their pitching staff can be overwhelmed. Now, again, they've been rested. They haven't had to work, and we'll see if that's a positive or a negative. But you have to get in that bullpen. Now, they've got some speed. They take advantage of the base paths is what I've seen. What they did in UCLA was pretty remarkable, and they're the darling. I mean, there's going to be a ton of people there from that area, Michigan fans, much like when 2011, when the first time Vanderbilt went out there. It's going to be a novelty. I would think the Midwestern crowd will probably rally behind them somewhat, and I would think they might have slight crowd advantage being in that area. So, yeah, it's going to be, there's going to be some things that they're going to be bringing up on television constantly and building this thing up. But kudos to Eric Bakich, because, here's a guy who left Vanderbilt, went to Maryland, built that program up a tad bit before then. He got really, really strong, got him some renovations at that stadium, and then he goes to Michigan. And, we're talking about a guy here, and this might even be brought up. Bakich had a base salary of $185,000 this year. Now, I know we got some extra money on some endorsements and probably some camp money, but we're talking about $185,000 base salary compared to SEC coaches of over $1 million. And the article that I read said he's already been told he's going to get a raise. Well, you better give him a raise, because the door's going to be knocking, especially after this. So lots to look forward to, and I think it's going to be a good series, and looking forward to it.
One really interesting dynamic that sets up this series is that Michigan threw three pitchers. It threw no one outside its rotation in Omaha. It threw Jeff Criswell, Carl Kaufman, and Tommy Henry. Kaufman started games 1 and 3 against Texas Tech. Those were on Saturday and Friday, respectively. I would presume that puts him out to probably Wednesday at the latest, or the soonest, I would guess.
Right.
And then
I think so.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I would just think so. Yeah, it gets to be, though, when you're talking about the first time for a national title, that some of those kids will say, "Give me the ball." Pitch counts, don't worry. But he does come from the Corbin tree. They're not going to ruin somebody and pitch him too early. But yeah, they look like they're set up pretty much with well rest.
Well, the other interesting thing is they used Jeff Criswell, one of their other weekend starters, to close 2 of those 3 games. And then in between, Tommy Henry threw that infamous 10-strikeout, 3-hit shutout of Florida State, in which he did not walk anybody. So they did not pitch their bullpen technically. They just took their starter, one of their starters, and made him the closer. But I do wonder, that doesn't exactly reek a trust of your bullpen. There was a conversation about this last night that in the press box, and I've not seen them, I'm just taking people's word for it, that Michigan really maybe does not want to go to its bullpen. So given that it used one of its starters already, I think that Kaufman probably would be available to a game 3, like we said. I would presume Henry throws game 1, but that sets up a really interesting scenario given how the Wolverines have used their pitching so far.
Yeah, and on the Vanderbilt side, comparatively, you got fellows who can hopefully go deep in the game in game 1, and Rocker, who's shown that he can do that as well. I don't think either team is real enamored right now with their bullpen. Think about who's pitched for Vanderbilt. Zach King threw a batter early on in the week. You've had Tyler Brown throw several games. You had Eater last night. We still haven't seen Smith. There's several guys out there who have not gotten in the leash. That we've talked about this last week. There's, with the exception of Keanu Citrus, who came in last night in a pinch running situation, there have been no pinch hitters for Vanderbilt that have been different. The lineup has been the very exact same. There's been no changes. And the same is with the bullpen. There haven't been a lot of activity from either team. And I'll say right now, mark my word, that Vanderbilt's 5 through 8 guys are going to have to pitch in that 72-hour period, or might be 48-hour period, hopefully for our sake and our advantage. But those 5 through 8 guys are going to have to throw. I just have a feeling they're going to, and they're going to have to throw well. And going to have to be that guy who steps in the event something happens, because over that time period, and again, you could have some guys step in. There's a question of whether Raby's going to pitch, when he would go, and scenario they don't have to worry about is if they had to play today, Fellows probably would have gone, and you had a situation with. And I know some people would say you're wrong, Chip, but I would have bet you they would have pitched Raby in game 1, and then turned it over with Rocker and then whomever on the game 3. But that's just the way I think they roll. But yeah, I don't think either team right now is enamored with their bullpen, and that's a problem. And those guys have got to get confidence on both sides. Not sure about the confidence level on the Michigan side, but the Vanderbilt, whatever's going on there, whether it's lack of confidence by Brownie and Corbin to go to them, but it's going to be needed, I think, in my opinion, some point in that 72-hour time frame.
Yeah, the wild card to me is Ethan Smith, because I think he's their best. Right. I mean, he's the last time we saw him was in the game that Duke blew Vanderbilt out, and that was, a lot of the damage was done before and after him. He threw 3 innings, gave up 1 run, which seemed to me that would make more of an endorsement for his case, that he was the only guy effective that night. I just don't know what they're thinking with him. I'm not sure that I've seen him up, at least in the 2 games that I've been out there. I can't see the bullpen very clearly. I mean, we could see it. We can see guys throwing, but we can't read numbers. We're so far away. Has he even been up at any point the last 2 games? Or was he even up on?
I don't think so.
I don't remember him being up. I watched game 1 from TV. Now, maybe this is it. I don't know that. Now, when he pitched in Hoover, I think he was a little too amped up for that Mississippi State appearance. But that's been a while now. I don't. That's one that I don't really understand why we have not seen him to this point.
Well, you got the Ethan Smith at the SEC tournament. You get the Ethan Smith at the Duke Super Regional, where he was lights out. And it was mentioned on the broadcast last night, there's a difference between coming in a game like Eater comes in last night, when you have a potential, if necessary, game behind it if you had to. Things are going to get really amped up here in this 3-game, basically another version of a Super Regional 2 out of 3 for the national title. And the nerves get a little bit, the stakes, of course, are higher, and the nerves could get ratcheted up. So I'm sure they have a pulse on who can handle it. And sometimes the stage can be too big for some of these players if they can't handle it, and the coaching staff knows. So I would think that Eater is going to be a guy who's going to have to be called on. Zach King could be called on for a couple batters in a situation or an inning. I think they could use him. So it's a definite. I still say, and I've been saying this, that the knock on this team, they won 57 games, and the knock is, I think the book is out, and the best way to say it was what I think it was Cal Peterson who said the bridge to get to Tyler Brown has been questionable. It has not been awful, but it has been definitely questionable. That bridge of pitchers to get to Tyler Brown has not been what you would say is 100% confident in the coaching staff's mind, and that's got to change. And now, if they go out there and get 2 complete games and win it all, that doesn't need to worry about it. But more times than not, I think you're going to have to see that you're going to have those guys perform in order to win a national title.
Well, I think Kyle put that perfectly. Now, I said before the tournament, Chip, I thought that the most important player maybe for them in the NCAA tournament was Drake Fellows. He was great against Ohio State, bad against Duke, and great against Mississippi State. I think, again, he may be the key performer in the regional. I'm not saying that they can't win if he doesn't pitch well, but I think if he does pitch well, it's going to be borderline improbable that they lose the regional. I mean, it could happen, but I think it's much less likely. Not the regional, but the College World Series final, excuse me.
Yeah, they got to get off to a good start here. And Michigan's going to be amped out. And like I mentioned, I think there's going to be a slight crowd advantage there. So he's just got to pitch and keep his ball down where it runs and not leave balls out over the plate. I think that, he's a guy who's extremely confident too, and in his game. And, a little bit of the Michigan games throughout the week. And one thing that I did notice, when they did face 95, 96, 97, they had a little hard time catching up with it. I think they struggled with the power pitchers. And, they haven't seen, of course, they got to remember they went up to UCLA and beat the number one seed at their own park. So they've seen great teams. But the trio of arms that they're perhaps going to have to see over the next, in that 3-day period, just SEC pitching on a consistent basis is a lot different than what they've been seeing in their league. So the question is going to be, can they handle the power arms available offensively and translate that into what they've been doing on their side of the bracket? They've breezed through it, so to speak. They've had everything's pretty much gone to their favor. They have the extra rest. They didn't have to play last night. You got the 2 this week, so we'll see how they handle it. But Bakic will have his team primed and ready to go. And this is a big moment. This is a big moment for their league. It's a big moment for the school. It's a big moment for Midwestern baseball to see if they can take on the big boys and catapult themselves to a national championship.
What do you make of J.J. Bleday right now? Because I've seen good and I've seen bad, and at times I felt like he's really close to being the Bleday we saw all year. He just about got one out of the park last night. Of course, the walk at the end of the game was really key in springing that 2-run inning that won them the game. And in between, he had 2 of the worst at-bats I've seen all year. Swung at some pitches way out of the zone. But then I look back to the game before that, and I'd almost forgotten this. But in the Mississippi State game, he walks the first at-bat. He singles first at-bat, walks the second at-bat, doubles the third at-bat. That was hit pretty well, and singles in the next one. So it just seems like they're kind of mixed indications, more good ones than not. But I felt like the Bleday that hit the double pretty hard against State and who almost got one out on Friday night that's kind of the Bleday we'd seen all year, but then you have those 2 bad at-bats in between. What do you take on where he is right now?
Oh, overall, I think he's just struggling a little bit. I think he's struggling with the changeup. I think he's struggled with that for like 3.5, 4 weeks now. He went on such a tear, Chris, that we all got spoiled, and you thought he was going to hit the ball out of the park. And he's lifting the ball a little bit more. He and Austin Martin in the regionals were doing that consistently, if you recall. And you're just waiting. You're waiting for a guy like that just to bust open and have almost like I'm funny that I'm saying this, is that he would come out Monday and Vanderbilt wins the national title and he gets named the MVP because he goes 7 for 9, or more, 10 for 12 and has a breakout and a couple home runs. He's that type of dynamic of a hitter, but he's it's the same you can say for Ethan Paul. I mean, Ethan Paul was 0 for 3. And Ethan's not had a good couple weeks. He's had some sporadic moments, but he's not had a good couple weeks. And just as you think, well, the world's coming around, and he's struggling. He gets the big double down the line. What's happening with these kids? These kids are the ones that 1 through 9 who's been in this lineup have stuck with it. And when they need big hits, they're getting it. And it's kind of got that magic formula and potion that they can, in the big moment, still provide the big hit or the big walk like Bleday did. But I think it's safe to say he's struggling, Bleday, somewhat. Austin Martin hadn't been lighting the world on fire, except he gets the 2 home runs, of course, in game 1. But before that, he's been sporadic. So we'll see what a weekend of rest does for those guys. They'll train, I'm sure, today and tomorrow and get through that. But on the big stage, you want your big players to perform, and I think those guys will be expected to do so, and I fully think they will.
Chip, I'm about ready to put a bow on the podcast. Before we end it, let's get your thoughts on key storylines or things that you will be watching, things that may be key to Vanderbilt either winning or not winning in the title series.
These things can go, we've seen them go different ways here when they've been in the national championship game. The Virginia, of course, we're talking about the back-to-back years, 2014, 2015. And, we saw in 2015, Vanderbilt pretty much blew through the tournament and then had the win in game one, and everybody's getting ready to post up another trophy and put it in the trophy case. And then Virginia, some strange things happened in game two. They go on and win that game. And then, of course, they had the bad game three that kind of held over from game two in that. So it's a tough, I would fully expect it to go three. For some reason, I don't think either team's going to sweep. I think, Vanderbilt's got the advantage as far as being there. And even though these guys haven't, none of the players have ever played in a championship series. The program has, and I think they've been programmed to be in big ball games. They've been on big stages. So, I think storylines to look to is if Vanderbilt can get into Michigan's pen, number one, they've got to get the pitch counts up high, drop some runs in early, and get to the advantage of getting a win-one would be very, very key. For Michigan's sake, as far as what they're trying to do, I think they need to also try to get in Vanderbilt's pen and make those 5 through 8 pitchers pitch. Those numbers, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pitchers who haven't done a whole lot. So bullpens are key. I think controlling emotions. I think Vanderbilt has the edge there as far as being on the big stage. There's going to be a lot of play up as far as how much, Bakich and Corbin know about each other and tendencies. And you'll hear a whole lot about that over a 3-day period. And they'll have video and they'll show pictures of when Bakich was at Vanderbilt. And that's going to be played up. Does either team have an advantage of that? Does Corbin know Bakich and so on, as far as Bakich knowing Corbin and his tendencies? So I think it sets up for a great tournament. I don't think anything about the David Price that's good to talk about what's happened in that regional back in Nashville. I'm sure that will be brought up. That'll be a storyline, but none of those guys were around, and they probably were, 8 years old when that happened. And I'm sure Corbin will be asked about that, but none of those guys are around, and Bakich was even on the Vanderbilt staff. So I think it makes up for a great 3 days of baseball. If any of the listeners want to go out there and thinking about it, I urge them to do so. It's a magical time. I'm taking my two boys, big baseball guys, and it's hard to get to. It's one of the hardest places to get to on earth, I think. I laugh, and the flights are not great to get to, but I know there's some bus trips going on from Nashville. It's a 12-hour drive, and some people, I'm flying to Kansas City myself and then driving from there. You can get there, and once you get there, tickets shouldn't be a problem. There should be plenty of hotel rooms and tickets. So it's a great moment. You never know when you're going to get back, and it's a magical thing for families and fathers and sons and fathers and daughters to go take it in and see a national championship series.
Chip, the real estate market is heating up as the summer does. You were an expert in that business. Tell them about what you do at Fridrich & Clark.
Sure, Chris. Fridrich & Clark will be around for over 60 years, serving national families in Middle Tennessee and the Nashville area for that period. We got 2 offices, one in Brentwood and one in Nashville. And we can set you up if any of your callers, any of the listeners, of the podcast are interested in selling or buying their home. Give me a call and we'll have a discussion. We'll set you up with a realtor who specializes in your neighborhood or your area and walk you through the process of either buying or selling. It's a hot market. Houses are still going for premiums in most areas. You need a professional to sift through all the red tape and, as we call, a bullpen full of closers, people who know how to close deals, to write contracts, as far as on the sell side, how to list properties and price them accordingly. So check out our website at frederickandclark.com and give us a call at 615-327-4800 for any and all of your real estate needs.
Thank you so much, Chip.
All right, Chris. Hope to see you in a couple days.
You will indeed. All right, he's Chip Fridrich. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening. As always, remember to go on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to these on. Give us a favorable rating. That helps the podcast. Anyway, thank you for listening. We will be back with more episodes from Omaha next week.